Well, good evening again, and my name is Bob Graves, and it's good to be here with you tonight. And I need to let's see, I need to turn off some of that music there. Um, Tonight, I understand they're having a number of difficulties down there in the Florida studio, and so I'm actually broadcasting direct from the Binghamton studio, not our usual place for broadcasting from. But this is what we're going to try to do tonight, and let's hope that it works out well. And I need to also run a couple of other programs here to make sure that that we're all set up for what we're trying to do here. Now, tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of what faith is and how faith operates, and because I think that there have been a number of discussions that occur that strike me as being a lot of confusion, and I think that this confusion is in some ways on every side of the question. And so it even came up earlier today, and I've had this discussion with a number of people, and so I thought it would be helpful to just take a look at it tonight and see if we might be able to make some headroad on this topic tonight. Now, very often what happens is that there's this contention that exists between, say, faith and between faith and knowledge. And knowledge is something which, when particularly done scientifically, when done through validation and verification, represents something of which we can be absolutely certain in the sense of reasonableness and rationality. And as a result, this sort of knowledge tends to be extremely useful, absolutely useful. In fact, to ignore that kind of knowledge is to be done at your own peril. There's no way that one can live their life responsibly or successfully if they're going to ignore the verifiable and the kind of knowledge that we can validate as real and true. Now, because of that, that sort of knowledge tends to rise to a level of great prestige, and rightfully so. It should be considered to be very valuable and very valid. And as a result of that, I think that what happens is that there are many people who are people of faith. I'm going to readjust my chair a second. There are many people who are people of faith who find that they also believe things that people who don't have faith, or say they don't have faith, don't have a belief in. And I think that what happens is that many times people of faith want to compete on the same plane as people of knowledge. And that, of course, I think is an absurd desire. And I think it comes from a sense of insecurity and perhaps even a sense of ego. There may no doubt be a variety of other issues involved, but at some level it seems to me that people of faith are uncomfortable with the fact that faith doesn't possess some of the features that knowledge actually possesses, and as a result they tend to deal with that inadequacy, or that perceived inadequacy, by trying to turn faith into a substitute for knowledge. And I think that's a fatal mistake. It's a fatal mistake because the people of faith end up asserting a certainty they don't actually possess. Not only do they begin asserting a certainty they don't actually possess, they begin asserting certainties about things that they don't anticipate will later be demonstrated through actual knowledge to be false. And so they actually set themselves up for a lack of credibility by doing that. There's going to be no way that they'll be able to make that work in a manner that is going to actually result in anything other than their embarrassment or their you know, being found incredulous, and so that's unfortunately the way that's going to work out. Now, what I'm hoping to really get at tonight is the fact that faith is something that is other than knowledge, and that it is something that operates in a very different manner, and that this is something that people of faith are oftentimes uncomfortable with. And I think that's a shame, because when their discomfort, they overstate the kind of claims that can be made concerning faith, and they also try to turn faith into something that it isn't, and then they invite the criticism of others who want to then find a great deal of foolishness in what the people of faith are asserting. This leads to even more mischief. You see, one of the things that, and I don't blame people who don't have faith or people of atheists for doing this, it's a kind of mistake we all make. But, when somebody says something that you don't agree with, sometimes it is easy to mistake what a person says for what other people who might agree with that other person would say. And sometimes, for example, what I'm saying is that if people of faith misrepresent what faith is, people who don't have faith, who think that, this is what faith is, are really being seduced by people of faith who have an immature understanding of faith into understanding what it is. Now, that means that if you're going to criticize a person's faith, it's important to criticize what it is they have faith in, but not that they have faith. Because I'm going to argue that faith is in many ways, Greg Bray wouldn't like this, I'm going to argue that faith is in many ways an absolutely essential aspect of our lives, and that it is in fact, that we all have faith of various kinds in various things, and we're completely comfortable with that, every single one of us, in various ways. For example, if the moon is made of a particular substance or possesses a certain atmosphere of even just a small amount, I don't think it does, this is something that can be scientifically determined and validated. There may be some things that are of a nature that could be perhaps someday validated, even though now we can't. For example, the exact nature of what happens to the backside of certain planets when they're not facing the sun. This is not something we know an awful lot about. But it's possible that someday we could know a great deal about it. But this is something that falls into the area of knowledge. It's the kind of thing that possesses the character or quality of being verifiable. And there are some things that can possess that quality or character of being verifiable, even if we don't personally have the ability to verify it. And so that's an area that in many ways belongs to the domain of knowledge. But there are some things that simply can't be verified. They cannot be. And there's no way to verify them. They can only turn out that way or not. For example, when you get up in the morning, if you have to drive to work, there are many days when you do that. You head out to work, and you fully expect that you're going to arrive at work, that you're going to go through the process of taking the turns, picking out the streets, doing the routine you almost always do. There's a sense in which you go to work by faith, believing you will arrive there. There is absolutely no way to scientifically validate or verify if that's going to happen. There isn't. In fact, if we're going to be honest, it seems to me that there are enough statistical insights and studies to demonstrate that there's some risks involved here. You just might not show up at work. You could get involved in a car accident. It's going to take up your time and make you busy for the day. You could end up in the hospital. Something else might happen. You might get an emergency call on your way to work if you have your cell phone, and you find that you're going to have to not go to work that day. There's something you're going to have to attend to, something of utmost importance. There may be other things that might interrupt your day. Like that guy who was playing 9 holes of golf and was playing that one, the sixth hole there that's kind of near the road, and then this funeral procession goes by, and he takes his hat off and kind of honors the procession as it goes by, and some guy who's interested in playing through asks him, he's saying, "Oh, wow, that's awful nice of you to take your hat off and kind of pay honor to this hearse going by." And of course the golfer says, "Well, it's only right. We were married for 20 years." But no. But so things can happen that will interrupt what it is you expect would occur. But the truth is that many of us could not do many of the things we do if there weren't, to some degree, an expectation of some sort that it is likely to end up with a particular outcome. You go to work 5 days a week. You do that expecting that the day is going to come when you're going to get that paycheck. Truth is, if you had any serious doubts that that paycheck would be coming in, you might not be all that interested in going into work. In fact, you might even consider not going into work and actually looking for another job that day, or cutting back your work time while you're looking for another job, hoping that the bottom doesn't fall out underneath you before the end comes. And in fact, you do that with a faith believing that you will find a job. So, as you can see, we're talking about motivation towards behavior that is dedicated towards activities that you have reason to believe are going to result in some sort of an outcome that makes the effort worthwhile. And that if that outcome weren't going to come, the effort you're putting forth is not worthwhile. And yet, there is absolutely no scientific way whatsoever. This is an issue to validate it and verify it. It can only be validated and verified once it happens. But once it happens, you're no longer putting forth the effort to make it happen. So, what I'm talking about is that we live our lives every day motivated to do certain things, to take certain actions, to make certain choices, to put into play certain kinds of processes that we do in faith, believing that we are reasonable in doing so, and yet these are things that cannot be validated or verified until they come to pass. Now, I think you can see that I'm talking about different kinds of things. It is one thing for me to say, pick up this glass and by faith make assertions about what it's made out of. That's stupid. That's ridiculous. That's an abuse of faith. I don't need to do that with faith. I either know what it's made out of or I don't know, or I can find out or I can't find out. And I suppose in some sense I believe it's made out of some sort of material that if I drink stuff in that's in this glass that I'm not going to die because the glass poisons me, I mean, I did buy it in a store that sells glass, and we have discovered that some of the glasses you can buy in a store that might have lead lining in them are not really going to be all that good for you. But the point being is that we're talking about, when we talk about faith and we talk about knowledge, we are talking about a mode of approaching the kinds of motivation and anticipation that we have, whereby knowledge and faith are two different things. They don't operate on the same axes. They don't deal with the same issues. They can't. They're not the same thing. And unfortunately, too many theists use faith as if it is somehow not just a substitute for knowledge, but something that trumps knowledge, as if they can believe something by faith that is actually contrary to knowledge. I want to argue that's absurd. It's ridiculous, and it is simply dishonest. And there's a lot of theists who will be that way. I think of one particular individual. It really distressed me that he would do this. He was involved in a form of business where he believed by faith that God was directing him into this business and that God was going to bless him in this business. And he went forward in this business, making the kinds of decisions that he believed God was going to honor. And not only that, but it's also true that many of the decisions he made anticipating that that decision would have a positive outcome based on nothing other than the fact that, well, God is going to be blessing him in his business. I'm not going to tell you too many of the particulars here, but anyhow, with this one particular individual I'm thinking of, you couldn't deter him. You couldn't talk to him about, well, it is a general business principle that you need to do this and you need to do that, and you need to establish these things before it is appropriate to kind of make that sort of a decision. None of those kinds of pieces of advice would deter him because he had faith that Jesus was the CEO of his business, as it were. And very nice and delightful fellow. I really liked him a lot, and in many ways admire and appreciate him as a person. I really do, and have considered him in many ways a real friend. But he ended up making a number of decisions that came back to haunt him, that ended up destroying not only his business, but his reputation. He ended up doing things that he didn't even seem to want to believe were going to be contrary to what the law allows in some of its codes and regulations. And he ended up actually even going to prison for these things. And all the while, he pursued forward by faith, believing that God was going to be doing these things for him. And yet, he couldn't seem to understand, you're using your faith to trump the sort of business-making rubrics and decision-making mechanisms that we can use and that are absolutely part of the way business is run here in this country. When people do these things, they expect that certain things are going to be the norm. There are certain things that have to be done, certain rules and regulations that even the law requires for certain businesses to do in order to accomplish certain things or sell certain products or represent certain assertions, and no matter what happened, he used his faith as something that trumped wisdom, that trumped the sort of realities that were required of him by law. And this is unfortunate, but it's ridiculously absurd to be doing that. It ends up being unwittingly for him irresponsible, and it cost him a great deal. And his family suffered when he was gone, and there were a lot of struggles there, and all as a result of decisions he made, wanting to be a good person, wanting to be a faithful person, but believing that God was going to lead him into something, and for reasons that hard for me to even understand what it is that made him think that this is the kind of thing that God was going to do for him. But this is where faith sometimes even gets in the way of wisdom. So faith can become a substitute for knowledge, but it can also become a substitute for wisdom. And there is no substitute for wisdom, and there is no substitute for knowledge. And I will argue by the end of this program, there's also no substitute for faith. Knowledge is a horrible substitute for faith. Because although I believe that skepticism is an excellent tool to use in the scientific inquiry, when we're talking about things that are not within the domain of science, skepticism is not that useful a tool. Neither is gullibility. But we're actually talking about a different axis. Think about it. if you're a real skeptic, do you get in the car and head out to work in the morning and I doubt I'm really going to make it to work? I mean, I have no proof that I'm really going to make. I mean, I've done it in the past, but every day can be different. The circumstances and situations that I find at that intersection are different every day. Sometimes it's very similar, but there have been accidents there before, and there have been times when there was even construction, and I had to go. So, I'm kind of scared. You don't go to work like that. You don't live in that kind of skepticism when it comes to that sort of thing. Instead, you find it's far more productive to head out to work, fully anticipating you're going to get there, and if anything's going to happen, it's going to keep you from that. You'll deal with that thing when it comes up. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And in fact, that's a far more productive way of living. Indeed, one of the principles of business, if you want to make good business decisions, is that sometimes businesses do make decisions that destroy the business. That it can happen. Usually it's when they make a foolish decision. But one of the best ways for a business to start making foolish decisions is to assume that it's likely they're not going to continue to exist. A business should maintain itself in a manner where it can reasonably anticipate that it's going to continue to be in business, and it should make its decisions based upon the assumption that it will continue to be in business. Now, it's also true that that might not happen, but as you look back at it, the businesses that make their decisions based on the faith that they will continue to be in business, more often than not, that attitude pays off. It allows them to make decisions they might hesitate to make otherwise that pay off. And usually the business that is not going to end up being in business and that makes decisions anyway as if they're going to continue to be in business is the business that is actually going out of business either because they already employ a great number of bad business styles of making decisions, or something is going on in the economy they have no control over that comes up and somehow wipes out what it is they could have been doing. And there's nothing you can do about that when that happens. And it can sometimes happen. It does, But nonetheless, to make good business decisions, one of the principles of running a business is to assume, and this is in a sense a kind of faith, assume that if you're doing things with reasonable business skills, making well-informed, well-consulted decisions as to what to do, well-researched decisions, that you should operate and continue assuming that you're going to continue to exist. Otherwise, you start making the kinds of decisions that anticipate the sort of failure and shrink back, and you prepare for them. And it seems to happen is something about our psychology that we seem to bring about those very things when we begin preparing for them like that, begin hesitating for them like that, begin telegraphing to other people that we're anticipating that, begin sharing with other people that we anticipate that when we hem and haw over what decision to make that involves them. So it's a good business decision to have that kind of faith. That one is going to continue to be a going concern. But there's different sorts of ways in which faith can apply. Now, one of the things that I think is interesting, and in fact I wanted to take a look at a particular text here. Let me see if I can find it. I'd written down some notes here, and let me see if I can find where I put that. Okay. It is interesting to note that that some people use a very bad translation of Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, as a justification for using faith as a substitute for a wide variety of things that it is no substitute for. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Now, in that verse, sometimes it is translated in a way that, let me see if I can find it. What the King James is one particularly bad version of that. Let me see if I can find that that particular verse in the King James. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Now, that's a very poor translation to have translated that word there as evidence, because the NIV translates it more as assurance, and as we look at it, the actual word that is used here has to do with it has more to do with a sense of assurance or trusting in what will be reality, not what is reality. And so, in a sense, when we call it evidence, when it's translated as evidence, this turns it into something that, in particular, determinate language, sounds way too much as if it's in the area and domain of science, which is an extremely evidentiary discipline. They need hard data, hard facts to demonstrate the assertions and hypotheses that they work with, or they have to abandon them. And that's part of the scientific discipline. Let's see, we've got it looks to me like we might have a comment here. I just need to find out what this is. And this may be something from before. Is Bob a left-handed guitar player, or is the image inverted? You mean I shouldn't build my company upon the Jesus Jehovah's Rock of Bible-based kingdom principles? Okay, yeah, I have no idea what's going on with the image. Sometimes it comes across reversed and all that, and I've noticed that one of my webcams just does that, and sometimes it'll flip on me while we're in the middle of a broadcast, and because my face is so symmetrical, sometimes you don't notice that, and particularly if it's close up. But anyway, yeah, that's an interesting comment. But back to this, you mean I shouldn't build my company? No. In fact, in my opinion, it is absurdly irresponsible to think that somehow because I'm in business and because I love God, that God is going to somehow rig the deck in my favor so that I'm going to succeed. Now, I realize a lot of people of faith want to believe that sort of thing, and there's plenty of examples of that. I think even in the biblical text where people did do that, and lucky you if it works out. But I really don't see that as what faith, what the role of faith. Now, here's another example of where faith fits in. We know and can reasonably assume that we will all die one day. There's a sense in which, although that's happened every time, just as when we head out to work, we don't know necessarily that today we're going to end up there. So too, we don't know that there might come a day when something happens and we don't die. we stop dying. We continue living on. I hate to see what we look like when we're 300 years old, all wrinkled up or whatever. But the truth is, none of us have verifiably gone beyond the point of death and returned to report back what is there. Now, there have been many people who have had what we call near-death experiences. I've had one myself. There is no way to verify or validate that experience was what it seemed to be. There is no way to do that. Not at all. And yet, it seems quite likely it seems quite reasonable to understand that there is coming a day when all of us who are currently alive will be dead. What happens then? What happens after that? This is not a question that knowledge or skepticism can actually answer. Because when it comes to skepticism and knowledge, we don't know. We really don't know. There's nothing even to be skeptical about, in a sense, because we simply don't know. But it's going to be something, and among those somethings could be that it's going to be nothing. But it is either going to be nothing or something, and we don't know which. Viewer comment, Bob, could you spend a little more time explaining the differences between belief and knowledge, please? Okay, knowledge, as I understand it, is the insight that we possess concerning information that is verifiable, that can be validated, and that can be known with certainty. Um, there's a sense in which that is scientific knowledge. Now, the word knowledge means a lot of things. We can use the word knowledge also in terms of familiarity. Um, uh, I've talked with Dr. Jones on the phone a number of times. I've never seen him in person, other than over Skype and things like that. Uh, but I've gotten to know him over the last year since I've been doing this, and I feel like I know him. Now, there's a sense in which my knowledge of him doesn't involve things that I can verify or validate. They may be reasonable. I may even be able to share things about him that I know that a lot of people say, yeah, I've known him too, and that's what I think. That's how I understand him. And other people might say, well, I don't get that out of him at all. So there's a different kind of knowledge that we're talking about familiarity. There's a knowledge that I have, say, in playing the guitar, where some of the feel that I've developed involves almost an intimacy with the instrument that involves a melting of what that instrument is with my neurological responses, so that I behave like a musician with it when I have it in my hands, and that's a kind of knowledge. So there's many different kinds of knowledge, and we use the word in a variety of different ways. But since I've been talking more along the lines of how faith and knowledge are oftentimes bumping heads, and how faith is inappropriately sometimes used as if it's a substitute for knowledge, usually in that we're talking about the knowledge of things that I can know, like I can know that 2 plus 2 is 4. I can discover that a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and I can find ways of validating it and verifying it and working with it and demonstrating that it proves to be true. So there are some things that are just hard facts that can be known and validated and verified. But these involve things that possess the quality and character of verifiability. But there are some things that cannot be verified or validated. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We can predict. We could probably make a number of great predictions based upon the trajectories of things that we see and the experience we've already had in the past. And I suppose there's many ways in which we actually really need to do that. And we may make many such projections. Those projections are in many ways a matter of faith. Faith is that which we involves that which we, it is, as Hebrews 11 I think puts it, what we hope for. And in that, I don't think it means that, well, I hope my wife loves me. Now, I'm not talking about things for the future now. I actually feel quite assured that she does. But what I'm hoping for in tomorrow, I am hoping when I raise my daughter that the decisions I'm making today are going to contribute to her well-being and becoming an independent, productive adult. I don't know that they will, but I believe they will, and I'm acting on the kind of fatherly and parental philosophy that I'm operating on because I put my trust in it. But I don't know exactly, and nor can I validate or verify it until it happens, and then it's too late to decide how I'm going to parent my daughter, how this is going to work out. So faith involves the necessary beliefs that we have about things that are beyond of verifiability, that can still be reasonable to assume, about things that we can't know but yet must act on. And so faith comes into play there, and I think that faith comes into play for all people over various things. Now, I will say this, and I think this is important to understand. Faith in God is just such a kind of use of faith. And as a result, because this is one of those things that is not verifiable, it's the kind of thing that can't be validated, I think this is something that people who are theists need to be honest about. Because this involves something that cannot be validated or verified, it remains thereby completely reasonable for a person to believe in God, and it is perfectly reasonable for them not to. If they don't find it compelling, they don't find it coherent, they don't find it the sort of thing that motivates their behavior or what have you, then I think that since this involves an area that is beyond verification and validation, that it has to remain completely respectable for people to have various different opinions about what might be the answer to that question. Is there a God? You see, it's a question that involves the unverifiable nature. The question can't be verified. And guess what? There either is or isn't. And interestingly enough, if there is or if there isn't, that is the way it is, irrespective of what I do or don't have faith in. My faith doesn't change that reality. My skepticism doesn't change that reality. It's just where I am in relationship to that possible reality, period. And in a sense, that is a stab in the dark. And we all have to live our lives with an anticipation of what our present purposes are going to culminate in. And I see that as an act of faith. And the truth is, I don't think that we could live without. In fact, there's this one verse here that is let me see if I can find it here. I'm going to look in some of my notes here. There's a verse here that I think gets translated and abused in the way that it gets used. I think it says, where's that? Without faith, it is impossible to please God. When you look at that. And without faith, it is impossible to please God. Well, you know what? if you take a look at that in the Greek, number one, the word God isn't in there. It isn't there. In fact, there is nothing attached to the word pleased that we can definitely identify. It's dangling. And that's an interesting thing to see. You have to infer from it what might be intended as to, what do you mean by pleased? And as I see it, I think that some of the concepts that I get when I even think about this cognitive behavior of heading out in some sort of an enterprise with certain hopes that it will end up being productive or fruitful or end up in a particular way, that this is something that we would have a great deal of anxiety about if we didn't have faith in it working. Because there's so many things that can go wrong that could then end up being disastrous, that if we didn't head out in our days doing things that we believed by faith would culminate in certain eventual outcomes, we couldn't do them. And we couldn't operate on them being pleased with the effort to do it. We couldn't do it. We would instead feel a great deal of anxiety. We would be caught between, and that's part of what anxiety is. Anxiety is an emotion we experience when we feel, I need to act. I need to do something. There's a circumstance and a situation here that possesses a level of urgency. I need to do something, but I have no idea. If I do A, will that respond to the situation properly, or is it going to just lead to more disaster? Or how about B? If I do B, will that solve the problem, or is that going to blow up in my face? When you find yourself in a situation where you need to make a decision, and yet every option looks to you like it is as good a guess that could be the best choice or the worst choice, and you don't know which, this creates anxiety. And that immobilizes us. That keeps us from moving forward. So there's a sense in which we, in order to move forward, have to believe that the efforts we put towards moving forward will actually result in moving forward. And yet we can't verify that or prove that until such time as it happens. So anyway, this is where I see the realm of faith. And as a result, I really don't see faith cognitively as being anything uniquely different when applied to the presence of God, the existence of God, the existence of an afterlife, and headed out to work anticipating I'm going to arrive there. Cognitively, I just don't see any difference. And I don't think that faith is useful for things that are, you know, uh, likely not to be true. The truth is, the existence of the universe is for all of us a puzzle. It is. What causes it? Well, we have a variety of possibilities we can think of. You know, we talk about the Big Bang. We talk about possibilities of cyclical, constant changes of in and out of different formations in existence, and it's eternal. And so we have a variety of ideas, but we don't know. We really don't know, and we have no way of knowing these things. None. And yet, whatever it is we conclude or think or dismiss can radically change the way we go about what it is we do. Not necessarily for better or worse, but it can nonetheless have a huge impact. And we're talking about things that are genuinely real questions. And the possibility of God and all of that, in my opinion, is as reasonable a conclusion as the possibility of no God. And I consider both of those as being equally reasonable for many, many reasons. Now, for me, I consider myself many times to be what you might call an agnostic theist. That is, I am a believer when it comes in to terms of what do I believe. But when it comes to what I know, I absolutely fully admit that I don't know anything about this. I really don't. And I can see how everything that I think I do know has genuinely other genuine possible explanations. For example, and this is a true experience for me. Ever since I was about 5 or 6, I have often been accompanied by a sense of God's presence in my life. The feeling that He is there, the sensation of almost as if I could feel the hot air coming out of His nostrils as He's lovingly a little over my shoulder, or and I say that metaphorically, that sense of presence. And there have been times in my life when it would come and go, and there have been times in my life when it has been constant and ongoing. And I can say this, that probably for, let me see if I can nail it down. I don't know if I can. Since close to 1980 or so, it's been almost constant. This sense of presence, this sense of the love of God with me. And that is something that, although I sense that, it is completely indefinite in terms of describing it, what it is, what it looks like, what it acts like. I can't tell. I don't know. But at the same time, I experience that as God's presence. And by faith, I act on the belief that it is. But, there is nothing that can prove to me that that is so. There's also a lot that could suggest to me it's an hallucination. It's a coping mechanism. It's a way of my explaining some sort of sensation I experience for some other explicable reason. I don't know. I really don't know. So that's why I call myself an agnostic theist. Not only do I not know, because I don't know, it would be a stupidly ridiculous, absurd, and useless thing for me to try to persuade anybody else that this presence that I experience is indeed God. What do I need to do that for? And what could possibly be the value in that? Because I'll tell you this, if you have that sense, then you have it. And if you don't, you don't. And I don't know, it might be helpful for you to realize that some people do have that sense, but at the same time, this is not the sort of thing that my personal belief or my personal ego has, or my personal investment in it, has any relevance for your life. It doesn't. So, to me, it is an experience I find to be authentic and coherent. Now, one thing is for sure, I totally believe and know that this is my experience. I just don't know if my explanation of this experience is, in fact, a valid one. So there's another contrast between faith and knowledge. But anyhow, so this is part of where we find this conflict between faith and knowledge. Now, I want to say that a few things about wisdom before I just close down here for a moment, and that is this: that wisdom is different from knowledge, in that wisdom involves a certain a sense of anticipation as well. It's similar to faith. But one of the differences between, say, wisdom and faith is that wisdom is based upon a reasonable set of probabilities, and wisdom applies to things that will be validated and will be verified in time. It is therefore wise for me to get up and go to work when it's time to go, because even though I can't determine that I will be there, things will work out far better for me if every time I'm supposed to be there I go, you know. It's just wise, you know. So wisdom has to do with behaving in a manner that is in keeping with likely outcomes based upon a knowledge acquired through experience of how things tend to actually really work, and making decisions accordingly. So there's a sense in which wisdom is far closer to knowledge than it is to faith, and that there's a sense in which faith is a part of wisdom, but faith can also launch out in towards those areas where, by the time this can be validated or verified, we're no longer available to the moment of decisions that have to be then made thereafter. So it can be different in that respect. Anyhow, there we go. A few of my just random thoughts about faith and how it differs from, and it is therefore it's a different plane. It operates on a different axis, and I think everybody has faith in something, and operates with faith every day in a variety of things, even if they don't think they do. Anyhow, we're going to close that down, and hopefully in a few minutes here, we're going to start with a Google Hangout, which I'm also going to try to do from the Binghamton studio, and I have not really had much success in doing that from here in the past, but we're hopefully going to find a way of making that happen again. So thanks a lot for giving me your time here, and we'll talk to you later. Take care. And let's see here.